بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Tonight we continue with Kitab ut-Tauheed of Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah. We start off with chapter Bab al-Thalith. Right? Chapter باب من حقق التوحيد دخل الجنة بغير حساب. The chapter of the one who perfects at-Tawheed, monotheism, he will enter paradise without hisab, without reckoning. So last week we started off the book with the first two chapters, or with the introduction and chapter 1, however you want to number it. And we spoke about the first chapter was all about the meaning of Tawheed, right? Why we were created, the importance of Tawheed and all of that. We spoke about once again Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah, Asma'i wa Sifat, right? The chapter, and as we mentioned, it was just full of Quranic ayat and ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So we saw the meaning of Tawheed as found in the Quran and the Sunnah. As found in the Quran and the Sunnah. And then we came to the second chapter, which was, what was the second chapter we discussed last week?
We didn't discuss the second one.
Or the first chapter after the introduction, we discussed another chapter, which was
Chapter
the virtues, yes. Right? The fadl of Tawheed. The virtues or the merits of Tawheed. So first we discussed the meaning of Tawheed. Then we discussed the fadl, the status or the virtue or the merits of Tawheed. What did we discuss under that chapter? Who can remember any of the ahadith that we spoke about?
I think one of the most important hadith was, whoever truly believes in Allah and there is no other ilah but Allah is guaranteed Jannah.
He's guaranteed Jannah, okay.
And Ibn Abbas.
What else? What other ahadith did we discuss last week?
One of that, La ilaha illallah, is sincerity. If you say La ilaha illallah, you mean it sincerely. The fire is prohibited. Isn't that one of it?
Yes, right. The fire is forbidden from him. True. That was a hadith. Yes. Another hadith, the one who comes to the hadith Qudsi.
Isn't it true, man?
The hadith Qudsi, which was, I think it was hadith, what's it, Mu'adh? Hadith Qudsi was, or it was hadith of Anas, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the hadith Qudsi that whoever comes to me with a world full of sin, I will come to him with the world or the likes of such forgiveness, as long as he did not associate a partner with me. So these are the types of ahadith that we spoke about, which proves to us the merit of Tawheed, that Allah is willing to enter a person into Jannah as long as he perfected his Tawheed. And this is the status of Tawheed. That was that chapter which dealt with the virtue and the status of Tawheed, right? The third chapter, or the next chapter, speaks about perfecting the Tawheed. Bab man haqqaq at-Tawheed, the one who perfects the Tawheed. Then he will enter Jannah without hisab. Without hisab, meaning without any reckoning. طيب. So, what's the difference then between these two chapters? The virtue of Tawheed and this one of perfecting Tawheed. Right? Shaykh Fawzaan, Hafidhahullah, he says that man haqqaq at-Tawheed, the one who perfects Tawheed, means that the one who never ever associates a partner with Allah, and he hardly has any sin along with that. He's not a sinner. هذا تحقيق التوحيد. This is perfecting Tawheed. That you avoid shirk at all costs and you avoid sin at all costs as well. He says whoever reaches this level, he will enter Jannah without any reckoning. As for the previous level, which was just the virtue of Tawheed, then a muwahhid, a person who affirms Tawheed, but he doesn't perfect his monotheism, he doesn't perfect that belief, then he's a person that has many sins as well. So he may be a person of Tawheed, but along with that, he's a person who is a sinner as well. And because of that, he could still enter the fire. he could still end up having to be burnt for those sins, having to be purified from that sins firstly, and then perhaps he will enter Jannah. So he says, the muwahidun, the people of Tawheed are upon 3 levels. People of Tawheed are on 3 levels. The first level, or rather, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, ثُمَّ أَوْرَثْنَا الْكِتَابَ الَّذِينَ اصْطَفَيْنَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. Then we inherited this book to those from our slaves whom we have chosen. فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. This ayah speaks about the 3 levels of a muwahid, the 3 levels of a person of Tawheed. You get the one who is a ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. He oppresses himself. So, he is the first level. This first level is the one who, firstly, he's a muwahid. So, he is not a person who is upon shirk. He saves himself from shirk. Right? He worships Allah alone. But, he doesn't save himself from sins, which is obviously below shirk. And in this way, he oppresses himself by sinning constantly, by being a sinner, a person who sins in private perhaps, by, being someone who, yes, he may not fall into shirk, but he is very lenient with muharramat. He's very lenient with regards to muharramat. So you find that something is haram, but it's not that bad. Or if this is haram and you don't give it much importance. And what happens? You fall into lots of sins through this. As they say, a mountain is still made up of small granules of sand at the end of the day, right? So the same with sin. A person doesn't just become a major sinner overnight. Rather, it starts small. You start, belittling your sins, thinking it's just nothing. It's just one song. It's just a little bit of music. It's just a little bit of, and like that it builds. And it builds and it builds until you end up being a major sinner. Wa na'udhu billah. So this is the first level. Those muwahidun. What is a muwahid? A person of Tawheed, right? A muwahid is a person of Tawheed. The muwahidun, muwahideen, this is plural. Okay? So I don't have to translate these words all the time. The muwahidun, the first level, those people who save themselves from shirk, yes, but they don't perhaps save themselves from committing many sins. So that is the first level. What is the end result for these people? Come Qiyamah. What's the end result? Where do they go? Are they guaranteed Jannah? Are they guaranteed Jahannam? Or
Jannah with Allah's permission.
Yeah, so we say they are tahta mashi'atillah. Well, everybody's tahta mashi'atillah, meaning they are under the will of Allah. So with them, they are sinners, but they are guaranteed Jannah in the end, at least. But perhaps they have to first be purified from that sin and have to be burnt through the fire of Jahannam for this. This is the first category. The second category are those who are muqtasid. They are those who, obviously, once again, they are in the middle. Muqtasid means you're in the middle, right? They are those who save themselves from shirk and from innovations, and they leave off the haram, and that's it. They save themselves in terms of belief and they leave off the major sins, but that's it. You understand? So they're good people, they're pious people, they do well because they fulfill the wajibat and they abstain from haram. As for the highest level, they are those who are sabiqun bil khayrat. They are those who are the forerunners in goodness, bi'idnillah, by the will of Allah, by the permission of Allah. They are those who once again save themselves from all types of deviancies within their belief, right? From all types of shirk, major and minor, and from all types of innovations, from all types of bid'ah. They leave off all types of haram to the best of their ability, and they even go beyond that. You find that something is disliked, it's makruh, it's this, you avoid that thing, knowing that avoiding makruh is rewarding. What's the ruling on makruh? Something makruh, we say it's disliked. What's the ruling on makruh? Makruh is if you do it and it's disliked, is there sin upon you?
No.
There's no sin upon you. But if you abstain from it, you know, look, this thing is makruh, it's disliked in the Sharia, so I'm going to stay away from it for the sake of Allah, then you get rewarded for that. You get the reward of a good deed for abstaining from makruh. A simple example of makruh would be to give and take with your left hand. we say this is not haram, there's no sin upon you, but it's makruh. So if you were, let's say, I have this cup of tea in my left hand and my phone in my right hand, and I'm about to hand you the cup of tea, and I decide, hey, you know what? In my mind, I'm thinking, it's actually makruh. So I put down the phone, I put the tea in my right hand, and I give it off. That simple thing, you get a reward for that. Allah rewards you for this because you avoided the makruh. And you fulfill that which is recommended by giving with the right hand. This is an example. So, these are those type of people. And they even abstain from those things which are permissible. Some things which are permissible. Because sometimes when something is permissible, or you just deem everything to be permissible, then it can lead towards perhaps laziness, overeating. Like eating is permissible, but at times you leave it off and you fast for the sake of Allah. At times you leave off something that is permissible, because by leaving it off, it brings you closer to Allah. Okay? And taba'an, they are those who strive in their ta'at. They strive in their good deeds, in first of all with the wajibat, secondly with that which is mustahab, and these are the highest level of the muwahidun. This is the highest level, right? They take it to the next level. This is the people of ihsan, and this is the level of the people who perfect their belief. They perfect their tawheed, and they are the ones who enter Jannah bila hisab wala adhab. They enter Jannah without any reckoning, without any punishment. And it's upon each and every believer to strive to be from this group of believers. To firstly, we fix up our belief. We purify our belief from all types of misguidance, all types of shirk. We purify our worship from all types of innovations. And we purify our nafs from all types of haram, from all types of things which are disliked to Allah. And through this, we attain the highest level, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It's upon each one to strive for this, to become the best that he can. And through your aqeedah, this is what you should be. Right? Studying belief shouldn't just be something that's, like they say, jaf in Arabic, something that's very dry and boring. Rather, this should really bring life to your heart and spur you on to do as much good as possible and to become the best possible person, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So the author, he starts with the chapter and he says, وَقَوْلُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى وَقَوْلِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى إِنَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ كَانَ أُمَّةً قَانِتًا لِلَّهِ حَنِيفًا وَلَمْ يَكُ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Verily, or indeed, Ibrahim was a ummah. He was an ummah. قَانِتًا لِلَّهِ. Someone who was devoted and steadfast lillahi ta'ala, that for the sake of Allah. Hanifan, someone who was completely devoted to Allah. وَلَمْ يَكُ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and he was not from the mushrikeen. So the author, he puts this verse under the chapter of perfecting Tawheed. How does this verse fit into perfecting Tawheed? Think about it. I translated the verse roughly. How does this verse enter into this chapter of perfecting Tawheed guarantees you Jannah?
Just repeat that ayat, please.
Verily, Ibrahim was a leader. He was devout in his obedience towards Allah, inclining towards the truth, and he was not of those who associate partners with Allah. How does this verse refer, or how does this verse relate to perfecting Tawheed? We are speaking about perfecting our monotheism, perfecting our Tawheed. How does this verse, because he puts this is the first verse in the ayah, or in the chapter. The chapter is about perfecting Tawheed, guarantees you Jannah. How does this verse, how is this verse relevant in this chapter? That's what I want to know.
It's a declaration of faith.
This is how is it the declaration of faith?
Yeah, but,
Because let's say you purchase this book Kitab ut-Tauheed and you read, right? And you read now chapter of perfecting monotheism, guarantees you Jannah, and Allah said in the Quran that verily Ibrahim was a leader and he was devout and he was, etc., and he was not of the mushrikeen. And then you read the next verse. The thing is, we need to read with understanding. So you understand? So you buy the Kitab ut-Tauheed and then you read this and you need to reflect and understand, try to understand, how does this ayah fit into this chapter? What is the relevance of this verse to the chapter? The relevance is that Ibrahim alayhi salam was Abu al-Anbiya, the father of the prophets, but he was also an imam, he was also a leader in perfecting Tawheed. He was a leader in perfecting Tawheed. That's what made him, as great as he was. It was the fact, it was his belief. And if you look at his life and his sacrifices, then it started out as a youngster with his father and with his people. We know the story. Ibrahim and the idols, destroyed the idols, got thrown into the fire. All of this we know. Eventually he left because he couldn't stay in this place. Right? Later on he came across, when he was in Iraq, in the city called, Babel, and he met this king. What was the king called? This king claimed to be Rububiyah. He claimed Rububiyah. He claimed to be a Rabb. King was Nimrud. Right? So Ibrahim had issues with him. Eventually he had to leave. What was the issues? These people were upon shirk and Ibrahim was calling to Tawheed. And he had to leave his home. He had to pack up and go. Eventually he ended up leaving off Ishaq and their offspring with his wife Sarah in... Which place was it? Afwan? No. He left Ismail and Hajar in Makkah. Ismail and Hajar in Makkah. He left them in Sham. He left them in Sham. Syria. Sham is not actually just Syria. Sham actually refers to Syria, Palestine, and a lot of those surrounding areas. This was referred to as Sham in those days. Later on it became specific countries like Syria and Palestine. But that time it was just known as Sham. One big place, greater Syria if you want to call it that. So this was Ibrahim and his sacrifices. For what? For his beliefs. Until he left and Allah granted him better. Allah granted him, where were they in Sham? What happened in Sham? Eventually it became the Palestine. It became the Bayt al-Maqdis. The people in Makkah, his family in Makkah became where? They ended up staying where? In the Haram of Makkah. The Kaaba was there. He left, what Allah granted him and his family was the best of places. Because he sacrificed, for the sake of his belief, his homes. And Allah granted him better like this. And Allah in this ayah, He describes Ibrahim with 4 characteristics. He describes Ibrahim, number 1, as being an ummah. Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan. Ibrahim was an ummah. What does an ummah mean?
A nation.
A nation. Right? There are 3 meanings for the word ummah. One is a nation, one is a specific time, and another meaning is a leader. In this ayah, it means he was a leader. Ibrahim was a leader in goodness. He was a leader for people. And Allah mentions in the Quran that He says, Inni ja'iluka linnasi imama. I made you for the people an imam. So in this verse, Allah says, number 1, he was a leader. A leader in Tawheed, a leader in all types of goodness. Secondly, he was qanitan lillah. What does qanit mean? The qaniteen and the qanitat, Allah speaks about in the Quran. Qanit is a qanit is someone who is consistent in his obedience towards Allah. Someone who is consistent in his obedience and steadfast in his way. This is qanit. So Allah says he was qanit, he was consistent in his obedience, and he was steadfast in that. Shaykh Fawzaan explains and he says, meaning he wasn't someone who strove hard for 1 day, or 1 month, or 1 year, and after that, you leave off the good deeds again. You're right? He didn't only worship Allah on a Friday. He didn't only worship Allah in Ramadan, or during the days or during the nights of Ramadan. No, it was day in, day out. He was a qanit, steadfast in his worship, persistent in his worship, consistent. And he says, and this is what is sought after for people. This is what people should strive for. It is to be someone who is persistent, carrying on with his good deeds day in, day out, never ever leaving them off, even if it is qalilan, walau kana qalilan, even if your deeds are very few, but be consistent. And the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, ahabbul amali ila Allah adwamahu wa in qallah. The most beloved deeds to Allah are those that are consistent, even if they are few. Even if they are few, they are the most beloved to Allah. So you take sadaqah. You don't give sadaqah once every few months, and you come and you give it 300 rand. But if someone came and he gave a 1 rand every day, 1 rand every day, after 3 months it equates to about 90 rand. That is more beloved to Allah, because there was consistency. You didn't just come once and give them money and never again. There was consistency. This is more beloved to Allah. And it shows us a trick with our worship. That we don't have to worship Allah and be extreme. You just have to be consistent. When you recite Quran, you don't have to recite 10 juz in one go, or a whole juz in one go, depending how much you are capable of. But be consistent. Don't be someone who burns out. Because this what happens often. You burn out. You read 1 day 3, 4 ajza, next day 3, and the next day you're tired. Your throat is sore. The next day shaitan comes with this excuse and that excuse, and you already did so much. And the key to your worship is to be consistent. Consistency is key, like they say. And this, as the Prophet said, is most beloved to Allah. These type of deeds. So any act of worship, work on consistency as opposed to quantity, as opposed to doing a lot and a lot and a lot. Be consistent in your deeds. This makes you a qanit, someone who is consistent and steadfast. And this is what Allah describes Ibrahim alayhi salam as. So he was qanitan lillah. What does this teach us?
In the belief in the oneness of Allah.
Lillah, meaning it was all for the sake of Allah. All of this consistency, all of this being an imam, all of this good, all of this sacrifices. He was a muhajir, as we said. He left his city, he left his hometown. All of this was lillah. This proves that he was a muwahid, number one. Lillah meaning it was completely sincere for the sake of Allah. There was no riya, there was no sum'ah. Do I have to explain these terms? If there's any term you don't know, ask. No riya, meaning there was no showing off, no sum'ah. He was not seeking any type of reputation. He didn't want to be heard about. That's what sum'ah. Sum'ah comes from sami'a, which means to hear. Sum'ah means you want to be heard about. You seek a reputation. People speak about you. Fame, right? People's talking about him. That's sum'ah. Riya comes from ra'a, which means to see. So you show off in front of people. People see you. That's riya. There's a slight difference in the two. But both are technically the same, because both are void of ikhlas. Both are it's a type of showing off where your act of worship is not completely for the sake of Allah. So you make salah in front of people and you start to lengthen your rak'ah, you lengthen your sujood, you're reciting Quran, you give sadaqah in front of people, and all of this you want to show off. Today's day and age, again, there is fitna everywhere. There is fitna everywhere. So people, with regards to, for example, social media, there is fitna everywhere. People going on Hajj, people going on Umrah, the selfies are coming out, making dua in front of the Kaaba, making tawaf. Look at me in my ihram, look at me doing this, showing the world this, showing the world that. Why must you show off your acts of worship? These are acts of worship. They're not there for people to see. It's not people's business that you're making tawaf. What benefit is it going to be that people see you making tawaf? What benefit is there in taking a photo in front of the Kaaba with your hands up, showing people, I'm making dua in front of the Kaaba? What benefit is there other than showing off? Can we think of any benefit? It's just to show people, look at me. That's what it is. And this is a fitna. In reality, it's a test and it's a trial from Allah to test your sincerity. Because it's so easy to take a picture and in 1 second, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, and it's there. It's so easy to take a picture of me with my books, reading. It's so easy to take a picture of me with my Quran. People are recording themselves. All of this is a test from Allah. Recording yourself, putting your dissertations upline, all of this. This is where your ikhlas is really tested. So, every single act of worship goes back to ikhlas. And Ibrahim alayhi salam was the most sincere of the sincere, obviously along with the other Anbiya alayhimus salam. So Shaykh Fawzaan mentions a good point here, and he says that ikhlas is when a person intends through his deeds the face of Allah. And your deed, what do you want from us? You want Allah. You want Allah's pleasure. You want Allah's happiness. You want to please Allah. You want to eventually reach the face of Allah, which is when you enter Jannah, you get to see the face of Allah. This is what you seek through your deeds, right? You don't seek anything from the dunya. No praise, no nothing, no thanks from people, right? And the point that he mentions is وَلَا يَسْتَمِعْ إِلَى لَوْمِهِمْ إِذَا لَامُوهُ فِي طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ. And he doesn't listen to their blames and their attacks when they blame him with regards to his worship. So, for example, they come to you and they say, you extreme. What is worship? Worship is also to speak to people, give them da'wah. Command the good, forbid the evil. When you say to them, don't do this, don't do that, and what do they come? You're an extremist. Why do you have a beard? You're an extremist. Why are you wearing niqab? Why are you covering your hair, sister? Why are you doing this, sister? Why are you doing that? This is what people come and they say. A person of ikhlas is not affected by such things. That's what the point is here. A person who is sincere is not affected by what people say, what people attack you with, what people accuse you of, what people use as a blame against you. لا يخافون لومة لائم. So Allah says in the Quran, they don't fear the blame of the blamers. You come and you invite people to something, they call you a extremist, a Wahhabi, a Salafi, and this and that. Alhamdulillah, this doesn't, you don't detract. This doesn't scare you away. Rather, you did that for the sake of Allah. People listened or not, khalas, it was for the sake of Allah. You understand? This is ikhlas. It's part of being steadfast. Right? It's steadfastness and all of that. The third sifa that Allah describes him within the ayah is Hanifan. That he was Hanifan. What does Hanif mean? What is it?
Isn't it monotheism?
Hanif is, yes, it's the way of monotheism. Millata Ibrahima Hanifa. In another verse, Allah says that the religion of Ibrahim was Hanifan. It was a religion of monotheism, a religion of sincerity. Right? But Hanif also comes from the word al-mail, which means to incline, an inclination. So what's meant here is that he was someone who was inclined and devoted towards Allah. His entire life was in devotion towards Allah. And taba'an, that starts with your belief. That starts with Tawheed. And he was completely detached from the world and from people. He was rather, everything was done for the sake of Allah, seeking goodness from Allah and Allah alone. وَلَمْ يَكُ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. The fourth attribute that is given to him is, he was not of the mushrikeen. And this is how this ayah enters into the chapter. That he was not of the mushrikeen. Rather, he was of those people who perfected Tawheed. And this is how this ayah is brought into this chapter. Because it's about perfecting your Tawheed. And Ibrahim was one of the best examples of perfecting Tawheed. That understood? And from this, perfecting Tawheed is that, number one, you don't fall into shirk yourself. Number two, you only worship Allah alone. Number three is that he also cut himself off from the mushrikeen. He also cut himself off from the mushrikeen. And this goes back to the issue of al-wala bara, which we discussed a few times. That amity and enmity for the sake of Allah. And it is Ibrahim's example that's given in the Quran about this, where he completely cut himself off from the mushrikeen. Right? Allah says in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِيهِمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Or rather in another verse, قَدْ كَانَتْ لَكُمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ فِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ. That in Ibrahim you have the perfect example, an excellent example. When he said to his people, إِنَّا بُرَآءُ مِنْكُمْ وَمِمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Verily we, meaning those people who were with him, we are completely, we're free from you. Yeah, we're innocent from you. We got nothing to do with you. We cut off completely from you. From you and from that which you worship besides Allah. كَفَرْنَا بِكُمْ وَبَدَى بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةُ وَالْبَغْضَاءُ. Right, we completely reject you. And between us and you is al-adawa and al-baghda. Between us and you is enmity or animosity. We are enemies to one another. Adawa, we are enemies to one another. And al-baghda, and hatred. So this is a strong word that's used. Baghda, there is hatred between us. Right? And this is part of al-wala wal-bara. That there is no love for the people of shirk. There is no love for the enemies of Allah. And these are the enemies of Allah, as Allah has clearly stated in the Quran, over and over. And then He says, abadan. This will remain like this forever. Abadan. Hatta tu'minu billahi wahdah. Until you worship Allah alone. As long as you are committing shirk, then between us and you will be this animosity and this hatred. And this will remain forever until you worship Allah alone. Allah says this was the example of Ibrahim. This was what he said to his people. So this shows that being a person of Tawheed is not just that you stick to yourself or you just worship Allah. No, it means that you completely cut yourself off. You stay away from Him. There is no love, there is no mahabbah towards them. There is no mawaddah. That's the word Allah uses in the Quran. That you give no mawaddah towards them. No love towards them. Right? And then Shaykh Salih explains that as for dunyawi dealings, tradings with regards to dunya, and this is something completely separate. You do your dealing with complete justice, with a good character, and that's perfectly permissible. The Prophet ﷺ used to deal with the Jews in his time, right? And this is obviously permissible. So Ibrahim had 4 characteristics, as Allah says in the Quran. Number 1, he was a leader, and a leader in goodness. Number 2, he was qanitan lillah. What does that mean? Qanitan. Consistent, steadfast, right? Lillah, meaning he was sincere. All of this was done sincerely for the sake of Allah. And he was hanifan. He was devoted to Allah completely. And he was not of the mushrikeen. Meaning, he was not of the mushrikeen. Yani, he was not a person of shirk. Nor was he of those who associated with the people of shirk. Right? So 2 things. He was not a mushrik, meaning he was not a mushrik himself. Nor was he of those who associated with the people of shirk. So the next ayah we have is the author goes on and he says, and Allah said, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ. And they are those who do not commit any shirk with their Rabb. They commit no shirk with their Rabb. Who is them? Who are they? Here, if you look at the context of the ayah, this is in Surah Mu'minun, verse 59. Okay? So in this surah here, amongst these verses, Allah is speaking about the mu'mineen. He's speaking about the characteristics of some of the best of believers. Speaking about the characteristics of the best of believers. So Allah again starts and He says in verse 57, Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ. They are those who are in awe for fear of their Rabb. Okay, that's the first characteristic. They are people of khashiyah, people of Khashya is a type of fear. You have this fear, genuine fear for Allah in your heart. A type of dread in your heart for Allah. Okay? And this of course is an action from the heart. It's a deed, it's an act of worship that comes from your heart. That you fear Allah in your heart. Right? You fear His punishment. You fear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take you into account for all of your shortcomings, all of your sins. And He says that this is from the most important and the greatest act of worship. And it's unbecoming of any person to be void of this act of worship. Right? That is fear. And then the Shaykh goes on and he explains that fear must also be accompanied by, what's the other two things? Love and hope. Right? These are the arkan of ibadah. The pillars of your worship is built upon three things. Number one is love. The love of Allah. You are driven by your love of Allah. The reason why you worship, abstain from haram, etc. is first and foremost because you love Allah. You love to worship Allah. You love to sit in classes and listen to the deen of Allah. You love to listen to the Quran and recite the Quran and make salah, etc. Secondly, you love Allah, hence you hate to anger Allah. Because no person loves to anger the one that's beloved to them. So hence, through your love of Allah, you abstain from sin. You abstain from that which is disliked. This is all driven by your love for Allah. Secondly, you have khawf, which is, as we are speaking about here, khashya, the fear of Allah. And that is, as we mentioned now, that you fear Allah will punish you, you fear Allah will not accept your deeds, etc. Thirdly, you have hope. That is that you always have hope in Allah's mercy. So your fear never ever leads you to becoming hopeless, or never ever leads you to becoming those who lose hope in the mercy of Allah. La tayasu min rahmatillah, as Allah says. O my slaves who transgress against themselves, you are sinners. La tayasu min rahmat, don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Meaning, you should fear Allah. You should fear Allah will reject your deeds. You should fear Allah will punish you. But that fear never ever leads you to losing hope. And this is how you stay balanced. You are guided by your love, but you fear Allah as well. And you also have that hope that Allah will still forgive you. Losing one of the three will corrupt you. If you are someone who doesn't love Allah, then how can you claim to be a believer? If you are someone who has no hope, then you will be doomed. Because you have no hope. You will lose hope and then you become depressed and you give up. If you have no fear, you become those who are too hopeful. So what happens? They sin and they sin and they sin and they sin because Allah is Ghafoor Rahim. Allah is most merciful, most compassionate. He forgives all sins, don't worry. You don't worry. And you become negligent and lax. So these three are very important. Love, hope and fear. Love, hope and fear. This is the pillars of your worship. Everything is built upon this. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah used to say that the believer that's between hope, fear and love is like a bird. The head of this bird is love. You cut off the head, there's no life. You take away love, there's no iman. And the two wings are hope and fear. If one of the wings are cut off, that bird's going to crash and fall. Likewise, you take away love and fear, or hope or fear from your iman, or from your worship, from your way of life, then you likewise, your iman will fall or crash. طيب. So there are those who are in awe with regards to the fear of their Rabb. Secondly, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ يُؤْمِنُونَ. They are those who are believers in the signs of their Rabb. They believe in the signs of their Rabb and they act upon they live by this. Right? Meaning the Quran. The ayat meaning the Quran. They believe in it, that this is the speech of Allah. The Quran is the words, the speech of Allah. From the beliefs of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that, is the Quran created or uncreated?
Not created.
Not created or created?
Not created.
I asked somebody a question recently, what is the best of creation? The best of creation. So, I said the Prophet ﷺ is the best of creation. Better than the better than all of the other Anbiya, and better than the angels, and better than... And so a youngster asked me, what about the Quran? Is the Prophet better than the Quran? How would you answer that?
The Quran is obviously the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is not created, so obviously it's...
So the Quran is the speech of Allah. Hence it is uncreated. The Quran is not a creation of Allah. It's not something that's created. Rather, it's uncreated. It is the speech of Allah. It is the words that Allah spoke. This is the Quran. Hence the Quran is an attribute of Allah. The Quran is an attribute of Allah. It's an uncreated speech of Allah. Hence it's from the attributes of Allah. This is why when we make certain ruqyah and seek isti'adah, we are told to isti'adah with through the Quran. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. I seek refuge in the perfect words of Allah from all evil that He has created. The perfect words of Allah is the Quran. We seek refuge through the Quran because it's an attribute of Allah. You understand? So we believe it is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He spoke, right? And it was revealed via Jibreel towards the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he preserved it, he memorized it from Jibreel, and then he relayed it to the rest of mankind. That's our belief with regards to the Quran. And then Shaykh Fawzaan says, what's also meant by this ayah, by believing in the Quran, meaning we believe in the Quran and we reflect and ponder over the Quran. And this is important. It's not just recitation. It's not just recitation. It's not just memorization and memorization and memorization. Rather, it's a reflection. It's that you actually try and understand. You know, I read something very interesting in one of a classical book, the first century book by Imam al-Tartushi. He was a Maliki scholar. He wrote a book on innovation, on bid'ah. In this book, he says one of the first innovations, in his opinion, is that people stopped studying the Quran in the way that the Sahaba studied the Quran. So he says people started to just memorize the Quran from cover to cover. And that's the way we all did it. We all do it, right? We memorize, and that's it. He says this is like an innovation to him. Because, he said, how did the Sahaba study? 10 ayat at a time. 10 ayat. They could have memorized more because they were Arabs. They had great memories. They understood. But they took 10 at a time. They never came back for another 10 except after they implemented the first 10. So they took 10, memorized it, implemented it in their lives, then came for the next, and then came for the next. As opposed to just taking it on. Memory and that's it. With no understanding, no reflection. And this is a very important point, because that one of the reasons that the Quran was revealed is for reflection. To understand it and to live by it. As opposed to just memorizing. And this is why many Sahaba were not Hafidhul Quran. Many Sahaba were not Hafidhul Quran. Yet they were the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, the best of the best. Because they paid more attention to understanding, implementing than just memorizing. Right? And that's an important point to mention. That you busy yourself with the Quran. Ya salam. How many of us have forsaken the Quran? That we don't spend time reading, we don't spend time reflecting, pondering, and really giving it a portion of our day. Many of us are guilty of it. And the Prophet ﷺ says in Surah Furqan, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّ إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. That the messenger said, Ya Allah, Ya my Rabb, verily my people took this Quran and have forsaken it. The Prophet says, Allah mentioned this ayah in the Quran. And if you check Tafsir ibn Kathir, he says, forsaking the Quran means not reflecting it. Forsaking the Quran means not acting upon it, not reciting it, not giving it importance, not abiding by its laws. This is forsaking the Quran. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah mentions this. And they don't have care for it. It's not important in their lives. Nor do they act upon it, its obligations, its instructions, nor do they abstain from its prohibitions. The third description for the mu'mineen is وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ. They are those who do not commit any shirk with their Rabb, right? And this again is the tahqiq of Tawheed that we're speaking about, perfecting Tawheed. They stay away from all types of shirk, small and big, major and minor. And the last sifah that Allah mentions here is وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْتُونَ مَا آتَوْا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ أنهم إلى ربهم راجعون. They are those who they give what they gave, right? Or they give what they give, meaning of charities, of sadaqah, of good deeds. وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ. But so they give, they do good, but their hearts are full of fear. وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ. Their hearts are full of fear. أَنَّهُمْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ رَاجِعُونَ. That they are going back to their Rabb. So they're people who did deeds, who gave, but yet their hearts were consistently full of fear. And this is very important. This is from the attributes of the great believers that Allah mentions. And Shaykh Fawzaan explains, and he says that they were not impressed by their deeds. They never allowed their deeds to impress them. They weren't amazed by their good deeds. But rather they did these great acts of worship. But they feared that Allah will reject it. So they did good deed and they good deeds, but they always had this fear, but what if it's not accepted? As opposed to, again, to us, we just do good and we assume that, I did the deed, it's done. How do you know it's accepted? How do we actually know that Allah won't reject this deed? How do we know, was that deed as pure as it should be? This is from the signs of the true believers. Allah says, Shaykh Fawzaan explains that they fear that Allah will reject their deeds. Right? Because of a khalal waqa'a fiha, because of, a flaw that was within this deed. So they would do deeds, but they knew that their deeds were not perfect. They made salah, maybe there was not sufficient khushu'. What if I didn't, focus well in my salah? Will Allah accept such a salah? This is how they were. They feared this. Because people are not perfect. People are not sinless. So they made jam' between the ta'ah and khawf. Right? They were people of worship, but they were also people of fear. They had this fear consistently. And and he says, as for the people who are negligent, then they combine. He says the believers were people who combined between worship and fear. So they did the good deeds, but they still feared what if it's not accepted. And that pushed them to do more. And that pushed them to perfect the deeds even more. He says, as for the people who are, negligent, he says they combine between laziness and aman and security. So they are lazy in their deeds and they believe that they are safe and secure. I did the deed, it's done. I made salah, it's finished. It's done. But they're lazy. They don't strive for perfection. They don't strive to better that salah. And this is the difference between the two groups. Being an excellent believer and being, a weak believer. He says they join between kasal and aman. Laziness and a type of, the sense of security. Where you feel that your deeds are done and it's accepted. And this, he says, is why the Prophet ﷺ said, لَنْ يَدْخُلَ أَحَدُكُمُ الْجَنَّةِ بِعَمَلِهِ. None of you will enter Jannah through his deeds. Through your deeds will never get you to Jannah. What does that mean? That Jannah is so perfect and your deeds are so imperfect, it's never ever going to get you to Jannah. It's like coming to buy something that's worth $1 million and you come with a 50 rand. No, but I want that thing. I want to trade my car for that Ferrari. But it's not worth the same thing. You coming with your deeds that is imperfect, it's full of sin, it's full of this, you missed out on so many things, and yet you want Jannah. The perfect abode of bliss and happiness and rest and pleasure. So the Prophet says, none of you will reach Jannah through your deeds. So they said to him, Ya Rasulullah, wala anta ya Rasulullah, not even you, O Messenger of Allah. And he said, wala ana, not even me. And this shows us how perfect Jannah is. Because not even the Prophet ﷺ's deeds is worthy of Jannah. That's what he's telling us. Not even his deeds is worthy of paradise. That shows us that even the perfect man's deeds is not worthy of this perfect place. So how great must Jannah then be? He said, إِلَّا أَنْ يَتَغَمَّدَنِيَ اللَّهُ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنْهُ وَفَضْلٍ. Except that Allah envelopes me and covers me with His mercy and His grace. And this is how I enter Jannah. It's through Allah's mercy and His grace, and that's how we get Jannah. Allah gives us Jannah because He is the most merciful. This is again a proof for the greatness of Allah and the vast mercy and rahmah of Allah. So, Jannah is not attained through deeds, but rather it's attained, or rather your deeds are the reason that you enter Jannah. So it doesn't mean that you can also just sit back and relax, but because of your deeds, Allah will have mercy on you and enter into Jannah. That's why Allah says, "Udkhulul Jannah bima kuntum ta'malun." Enter Jannah because of what you used to do. Because of what you used to do. That's why you will enter paradise. طيب. So he says that these people, they gave what they gave, and their hearts were full of fear that they were going to return to their Rabb. They feared that their deeds were few, and yet there were many obligations upon them, and they knew that there's no guarantee that the deeds are going to be accepted. It may be rejected for whatever reason. And this is why Allah is to say, Allah says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen. Allah only accepts from the people of taqwa. And the Shaykh says, and who is guaranteed? Who can guarantee himself that he is from the people of taqwa? Allah says, I only accept them from the people of taqwa. Shaykh Fawzaan says, who can guarantee for himself that he is from the people of taqwa? And this shows us that you can never ever just assume that all the good that you've been doing is accepted. So are you truly a person of taqwa? If not, if you feel you're not, then how do you know your deeds are accepted? There is no guarantee. And this was the way of these people. And then he says, but people today, they just do and they don't care. And they don't think, they don't worry. So he says a person should be doing his best. Do your best, but don't give up hope. Don't lose hope. Rather, think the best of Allah. Always have the best thoughts of Allah. You do your best and hope that Allah, this is where hope comes in. Hope that Allah will accept. And believe Allah through His mercy will accept. When this ayah was revealed, Aisha radiallahu anha, when she heard this, she said to the Prophet ﷺ, are these the people who do zina and steal and drink wine? That they fear that the punishment of their Rabb, meaning they gave what they gave, but their hearts are full of fear because they're going back to Allah. So she wants to know, are these people the sinners? Did they drink and did they commit zina that they feared going back to their Rabb even after all they did? The Prophet said, no, O daughter of As-Siddiq, rather they are people who prayed, they fasted, they did jihad, but they feared Allah will reject their deeds. This is the sifah that Allah gives for these believers. Okay, so we have 8 minutes. There's one hadith to end of the chapter, right? The hadith is narrated by Husayn ibn Abdul Rahman. He said that we were with Sa'id ibn Jubair, and he said, أيكم رأى الكوكب الذي انقض البارحة, right? He said to them that who from you saw the shooting star that fell last night? So I said that that I was not performing prayer, but I was stunned. So he asked me, what did you do then? I said, I recited an incantation. What incantation means? I did ruqyah. He was stung, so he did ruqyah. So you see, I have to read the sharh, man, because Shaykh Fawzaan, it's beneficial. So if we go over time, is it okay? Slightly, I'll go quick inshallah. Ruqyah, what is ruqyah?
I was going to ask that now.
Right, what is ruqyah? The person was stung, so he said, I did ruqyah.
This means he recites
Rather, he did not do ruqyah. He sought someone to do ruqyah for him.
to someone to recite the verse of the Quran that heals.
Certain verses of the Quran.
If there are specific verses of the Quran.
3 quarters or 4 quarters.
It's healing.
Okay, so ruqyah is basically that you recite, right, upon a person who is sick or afflicted by something, verses, specific verses from the Quran or du'as from the Sunnah. Right? You recite these Quranic ayat or certain adhkar from the Sunnah, and you blow on the affected area or you even have a slight blow with a little bit of spit, right? Not a lot, a little bit of a spit, right? Upon the area of where it's painful, where it's afflicted, etc. There are obviously various types of ruqyah that can be done, but this in general is ruqyah, right? It's translated as incantation, where you recite something and you blow on the affected area. An ayah of the Quran, a surah of the Quran, or certain du'as that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, right? So, Shaykh Fawzaan says this is from the most beneficial ways to seek a cure, is to recite. Because cure comes from who? From Allah. Cure comes from Allah. And I think there's a beautiful statement of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, where he said that he's amazed by people that the first thing they do when they get sick is they go to the doctor. He says, as opposed to firstly making dua, as opposed to firstly doing ruqyah and taking these means to seek a cure. But the first thing they do is rush to the doctor. I'm sick, help. But it's Allah who's the curer. And you can only get cure through Allah. Whereas dua is your weapon. Dua is your connection to the curer of all cures. So it should be that should be your first resort, to turn to Allah, to do these types of ruqyah. And a person doesn't need to be skilled in ruqyah. There's no such thing as a raqi. This is his specification. You can do ruqyah on yourself. Okay, you do ruqyah on yourself. It's a very simple thing. Surah Fatiha, one of the names for Fatiha is Ash-Shifa, the cure. Surah Fatiha is a cure. You read it, you blow it on the affected area. You read it, you can even blow it on water and drink it. You read it as a cure. That's your intention behind reciting it. You blow it on yourself, you blow it on your sick child, and you will find cure in this, bi'idhnillah, as long as you have yaqeen. Don't do it and hope, maybe it will work. Let's see if this works. Have belief. The Prophet ﷺ said this is a cure. Believe it's a cure. You believe, you tell yourself or the child, this will cure you. And you use that as a cure. Right? This is the way that we're supposed to be doing it. And he says, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran as a shifa. He revealed, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We sent down the Quran and as a shifa and a mercy for the believers. The Quran is a cure and a mercy. Allah says this in the Quran. So he says what's meant by this is, firstly, it's a cure ma'nawiyah. Meaning, it's a cure, what's the word? Ma'nawiyah and hissiyah. Tangible and intangible. Okay? Tangible and intangible. So, tangible is that what you can touch, right? Intangible, it's a cure in an intangible way. Meaning, it's a cure from shirk. It's a cure from nifaq. It's a cure from sin, the Quran. By reciting, by pondering, it will cure your heart from these things. It's also a tangible cure, meaning you can cure your body with it. You can cure many things with it. You understand? So, ruqyah is something that is legislated. It's a part of the deen as long as it's done properly. Right? We don't go, some people are going beyond the bounds with regards to ruqyah. Right? So, what did he do? He did ruqyah. This person was stung and he did ruqyah. So, the Sahabi tells him, فَمَا حَمَلَكَ عَلَى هَذَا. Sa'id ibn Jubayr says to him that, Urad is tabi'i, فَمَا حَمَلَكَ عَلَى هَذَا. Where did you get this from? Meaning, where did you get this? Who said you can do ruqyah? What does this teach us?
You don't accept just anything from
You can't just do anything in the deen. Right? What does this tell us? He says in this, it shows that the Salaf used to look for dalil. They used to search for dalil for what people are doing, what people are saying. Right? And he says, in the search for dalil, this is the way of the Salaf. This was another great man in front of him. There were tabi'een, the Sahaba sitting there. He said, but where did you get this from? Right? He didn't just accept it. So, anything that was done was said this was the way of the Sahaba or the way of the Tabi'in. But where does that come from? We can't just do it, just accept it. Right? And Shaykh Fawzaan says, هذا أدب السلف رحمهم الله. This was the adab of the Salaf. This was their way. They didn't just do as they pleased. Right? And he says, especially in ilaj, especially in matters of ilaj, of cure, of seeking a treatment, especially in these matters, you must be very cautious. Because he says, the nafs, it almost becomes settled with anything that can, if you find a cure, you'll take it. A person who's suffering, and you say, look, here's the cure. Guaranteed, they will take it. They're looking for that. That's what the nafs is really searching for. He says, even if it is something that's not allowed, but you guarantee someone a cure, look here, guaranteed. That person will submit to that. That person will rush towards that thing. He says, even if it's something that's not allowed. But he says, as for Sa'id ibn Jubayr rahimahullah, he feared this. He said, and this proves to us that ilaj, seeking a treatment and a cure, can only be done by that which is in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah. Only be done by that which is in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah. As for, he says, going to people, the Dajjalin, and the sorcerers, and people who are busy with haram, he says you can end up in shirk. Right? Shirk that can take you out of the fold of Islam. He says there are people who are slaughtering for other than Allah. For what? For treatment. Or they are making dua to other than Allah. Or they are seeking help from the jinn or from shayateen. For what? To find a cure. He says this can take you out the fold of Islam. And then he says, what's the point of becoming physically cured? How does that benefit you when your aqidah leaves you? So you lose your deen, but you maintain your physical health. You lose your spiritual health for your physical health. And he says this is something that we need to pay attention towards. So ruqyah is permissible as long as it's done properly. There are many people in Cape Town and outside that are doing ruqyah by using jinn. By doing jinn. They use jinn to help people to do this, to do that. This is seeking help from other than Allah. This is shirk with Allah. And there are many other issues. Black magic. Cut up this, cut up that. Throw this into this and eat this. And all of these things are, not from the deen of Allah and not allowed. Tayyib? Is there a question? So, where did I stop? He said, why did you do so? Right? So he said, I did so because I heard a hadith. Right? And then he mentions the hadith. He says, Ash-Sha'bi was a great imam, related to us. And he asked him, what did he relate to you? I said, he related on the authority of Buraidah ibn al-Husayb, who said, no ruqyah or incantation is permissible except that made because of an evil eye or a sting. Okay? So he mentions a hadith. No ruqyah is allowed except that which is done because of an evil eye or sting. We know what's evil eye. People give each other evil eye. The Prophet said, evil eye is haqq. Al-aynu haqq. It's real. It exists. Be careful of it. Right? Be careful of it. People give you the evil eye. That's why the Prophet says in another hadith, every person who is blessed there's a jealous person for him. There's always jealousy. And that's why he said, whenever you want to do something, you should keep it hidden for as long as possible. Don't tell people your plans. Don't tell people your ideas. Because people are hasad. People have jealousy. Keep it a secret for as long as you can. Right? And only tell those who you really trust. Who you really trust. But anyone else, keep it to yourself. There's no need to tell people everything. You never know who the person who has jealousy is. And again, social media comes into play here. We spoke about social media with showing off. Again, you put up pictures of you, your wife, your children, your daughter, your son. People look and they have... Sometimes you can't even control it. Sometimes, Ibn al-Qayyim said, sometimes a person doesn't even mean to put evil eye. But that jealousy is there. So, They see your child, they see this, they see that. They don't have children. They're not married. They're not this. There's evil eye. It can happen, and this is why you need to take the means and avoid it as much as possible. Not saying hide at home all day, but first of all, when you go out, you have your adhkar, that's your protection. Your adhkar, your morning, evening, that's your protection, right? But don't also, be unnecessary, where you show people everything in your life, and people just become more and more envious and jealous of you. So what's meant here, there is no ruqyah except for this. It's meant as an example, because there is ruqyah for all types of sickness. Okay, it's meant more as an example, especially meaning for this. Evil eye, it happens often, there is ruqyah for that. For that which is for a fever, for a fever, there is ruqyah for that. Except for evil eye and for a fever. Okay, but there is ruqyah for all types of illness. So when he came to Sa'id and he mentioned his proof, Sa'id replied to him and said, قَدْ أَحْسَنَ مَنْ انْتَهَى إِلَى مَا سَمِعَهُ. He praises him. And he said, whoever acts upon what he learns has done well. He praised him. He said, what's your proof firstly? He gives his proof, and then he says to him, whoever acts upon that which he has learned has done well. This is a praise for him to say. And it shows us again that, number one, acting upon your knowledge is important. That's what we learn from the statement of this tabi'i. That once you learn something, you put it into implementation. That you act upon it and you live by that. Right? And then Fawzaan says that look at the adab of Sa'id with this hadith. He says, well, he didn't know of it. He learned it. And he says that you have done well to act upon it. Right? And then he says that the Sa'id was not like other ignorant people. When a hadith reached them and it doesn't suit them, or they didn't know of it, then they reject the hadith. And they become upset. Why did you say this? Or they don't like the hadith and they start to reject the hadith. He said this was not the way of the Salaf again. Once they learned the hadith, they were humble, they accepted, and he actually praised him for acting by that which he knew. طيب. So then he says, however, I was informed by Ibn Abbas. Now he brings another hadith. So Sa'id basically tells him, however, meaning I have a better hadith than you. I have a better proof than you. Because Ibn Abbas narrates to me, right? That the Prophet ﷺ said, Ibn Abbas narrates to him that the Prophet ﷺ said, عُرِضَتْ عَلَيَّ الْأُمَمِ. The nations were shown before me. There were nations that were shown before me. So this again is from the mu'jizat of the Prophet ﷺ, the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ, that he saw the previous nations. How exactly he saw it, we don't know. Some ulama said this happened on the night of Isra and Mi'raj, that the previous nations were shown before him. The Prophet says, فَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِيَّ وَمَعَهُ الرَّهْطِ. I saw a prophet and with him was a raht. A raht is that there was people that was less than 10. His whole ummah was less than 10 people. The people who believed in him was less than 10. The people who disbelieved was everybody else. And he said, I saw a prophet and with him was 1 or 2 men. Only had 1 or 2 followers. And then he said, I saw a prophet and with him was not 1 follower. There were prophets he saw with no followers. Right? And Shaykh Fawzaan explains, and he said that from amongst the Anbiya, there were people who the entire nation belied him. The entire nation disbelieved in him. They had not 1 follower. And he says this is a proof that we don't accept majority as a proof. Someone comes and you say to him, why are you doing this? I'm not doing it. That is not a proof or an evidence that you are correct. Here was a prophet from the prophets of Allah, from the most trustworthy of men, from the best of men, and he had not 1 follower. So who was right, him or all the people who disbelieved in him? Right? From this is a clear proof that we don't accept numbers as a proof. You can have 1,000,000 against 1, that 1 man can be more righteous and more upon the truth than the entire 1,000,000. Right? And this again, there are so much important lessons from this hadith that can be derived. Right? Rather he says, what we use as a proof is whatever is in accordance with the haqq. Right? Whatever is accompanied by proof. Even if there are few. It's a few people, but they've got the proof, that's it. Even if they're one person, but he has the proofs, he's upon the Quran and the Sunnah, this is what we accept. Right? Allah said about Nuh, وَمَا آمَنَ مَعَهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. There was none that believed in him except very few. Nuh alayhi salam, one of the best of the prophets, إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. And we know the story. There was only an ark full. At the end of the day, everybody else was destroyed. طيب. And then he said, it was shown to me the Sawadun A'zam, Sawadun Azim, meaning a massive crowd was shown to the Prophet ﷺ. And then he said, فَظَنَنْتُ أَنَّهُمْ أُمَّتِي. And I thought this massive crowd was my ummah. So it was said to the Prophet ﷺ, this is Musa and his people. This massive crowd was Musa alayhi salam's people. What we learn from this is that Musa alayhi salam had the biggest following from amongst the other Anbiya, right? After the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then it was shown to him again another massive crowd, and it was said, this is your Ummah. هذه أمتك. And from amongst this Ummah is 70,000 people who will enter Jannah bila hisab wala adab. From amongst this Ummah of yours, there will be 70,000 who will enter Jannah without reckoning and without punishment. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said to Ibn Abbas narrates this hadith, right? So, meaning 70,000 will enter Jannah and the rest will have to have reckoning or punishment. But 70,000 will enter with no punishment and no reckoning, right? Straight to Jannah. 70,000 of the Ummah. Okay? There are other hadith that says, for every 70,000, for every 1,000 there's another 70,000. Something to that effect. For every 1,000 there's another 70,000. So which actually means it's actually a huge number. And the hadith in Bukhari says they will enter Jannah and their faces will be shining like the full moon. Right? Full of nur, radiant, and these people will enter into Jannah. Then the Prophet stood up and he went into his house. Meaning, he didn't tell them who the 70,000 is. So the Sahaba started to debate because they wanted to know. Shaykh Salih says again, this shows us the Sahaba's love for the truth, for love for dunya, for things of the year after. They weren't people who only worried about the dunya. They wanted to know who is this, who are these people, right? And they said, perhaps it must be those who were the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. It must be the Sahaba. Who else can it be but them? Meaning, they're the best of the Ummah. No one can reach them. They're the best of the best. Their praises we can talk about forever, right? Perhaps it's them. Another one came and said, it must be those who were born into Islam, وَلَمْ يُشْرِكُوا بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا, and they did not commit any type of shirk. They were born into Islam and did not commit any type of shirk. What's the lesson we derive from this? That being born into Islam is not sufficient. Born a Muslim is not sufficient. The companions didn't say they were born Muslim. They said they were born Muslim, وَلَمْ يُشْرِكُوا, and they never ever committed shirk after they were born Muslim. You understand the lesson? That even though they were born Muslim, that doesn't mean they will be the ones to. No, they were those who were born Muslim and they remained upon purity and Tawheed. They fell into no types of shirk, not minor and not major, right? And then the Prophet came out, and he came out, and obviously they went and asked him, and he informed them. He said, "Hum alladhina la yastarqun, la yastarqun." So, the beginning of the hadith, what did the man do? He looked for ruqyah, right? He went to look for someone to do ruqyah. Here, this hadith, this Sa'id now brings is, which he said is a better hadith. He says, the description of the 70,000 who will enter Jannah without hisab, without reckoning, without punishment is, number one, there are those who don't seek ruqyah from other people. They don't seek ruqyah from other people. What's the wisdom in that?
Don't put anyone else besides Allah.
Okay, fair enough. Do you say?
No, I was going to say something.
Meaning, Why not? What's the issue of seeking ruqyah from others? First of all, seeking ruqyah from others is permissible. It's not haram, it is permissible. If you know the person does it correctly, no problem, it's permissible. Right? But here the Prophet says, those who don't seek ruqyah from others. Meaning that to seek ruqyah from someone else is like a type of humiliation. That you go to this person and you need him to recite over you, you need him to maybe rub on your affected areas, etc. It's a type of, humiliation and need, putting your trust and a type of need upon someone else. Right? Whereas a believer should put his trust solely in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and rely solely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not haram, but it's much better to avoid. And it's that reward that it's of these people that will enter Jannah without hisab and adab. Right? And there are other ahadith that show us the importance of being someone who is not in need of people. This is something that's stressed upon in the Sunnah. To be a person that's not in need of others. You do your own thing. You stand your man. Right? You need something, you do it yourself. You're not someone who's always asking people for this and for that and depending on people. This is something that's stressed in the Sunnah. Right? So there were certain Sahaba who the Prophet ﷺ took an oath from them that they will never ask people for help. Abu Dhar was one of them. There were certain Sahaba that took an oath with the Prophet ﷺ that they will never ask people for help. So they would be riding on a horse, they will drop maybe their whip or something, and there'll be someone standing right there, but they would never ask. They would jump off, pick up their own stuff and carry on. They never asked people for anything. This was an oath that they took because they knew the virtue of, standing yourself and not being dependent on anybody else. Okay? If there's a dire need, there's nothing wrong. Especially if you need to learn something, you go and ask the ulama, etc. This doesn't fall under the same heading. Right? The second description for the 70,000 is وَلَا يَكْتَوُونَ. وَلَا يَكْتَوُونَ. Meaning, they do not get themselves cauterized for treatment. What does that mean? Like it burning, right? When you burn off some fat or burn off some part of the...
So burn clothes and open wound.
Yeah, cauterized. That's what's meant here. La yaktawun, cauterization. You don't go for cauterization. But they burn it. Like branding, yes. Branding. Right? So that's the second type. The third type, or the third description is وَلَا يَتَطَيَّرُونَ. They are not people who believe in evil omens, bad omens. Now you have this, and we will discuss that again in the future about omens, because that comes up in the book more specifically, right? But you don't believe in omens. You don't believe in if you do this, it's bad luck. If you do that, this can happen. If you do this, we don't believe in such things. Huh?
No?
Yeah. So we'll get to that inshallah when that chapter comes. So Ukasha stood up. Ukasha, he stood up and he said, Ya Rasulullah, ud'u Allah an yaj'alani minhum. Make dua that Allah makes me from amongst them. So the Prophet said, Anta minhum. You are from them. So a man stood up, another man, and he said, ud'u Allah an yaj'alani minhum. O Rasulullah, make dua that Allah makes me from them. So the Prophet said to him, Sabaqaka biha Ukasha. Ukasha preceded you in that. Ukasha won you to this dua. So what was the wisdom in the Prophet saying this?
He was being nice as well to the person.
Yes, because he knew that
everybody's going to ask.
Not only that, he knew that this man wasn't from amongst them. He knew that this man didn't reach the level of the 70,000. So instead of telling him, no, you're not deserved of that, no, you won't be from among them, he chose the best of words. And this was again from the adab of the Prophet ﷺ. Instead of putting him off, chasing them, he said to him, Ukasha preceded you in that. Ukasha, he beat you to this. Right? And this obviously shows us again the beauty and the adab that the Prophet had. That's a lesson to all of us. That when you want to liaise with people, have hikmah, use the best of words. Use words that won't chase people away. Use words that will soften their heart. Use words that will inspire them. Right? And this is obviously from the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? That is our hadith. That's the hadith that we have, and that's the end of the chapter. Alhamdulillah. Afwan for going over time. But next week, we carry on. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك